folks, how are we all doing this evening?
Good.
Excellent. Good. My name's Ethan. I'm joined up here by Alex. We are the two soldiers who are going to fire this cannon off for you all today. Before we actually get into firing the piece, talk a little bit about what we're wearing, the cannon itself, and what soldiers were doing here in the 1880s. So, we are dressed as members of the 23rd Infantry Regiment, Companies E and K, were stationed here from 1884 till 1890. And they served a unique purpose, as they were the ones caring for what was then Mackinac Island National Park. But in addition to their duties as some of the first park rangers, they were still, of course, soldiers. So they had to still do guard duty, drill duty, practicing their marksmanship, things of that nature. One of their other military duties was firing off cannons in what are known as salute shots. Essentially, just a blank charge, just black powder, no cannonball inside, just to make a loud bang to celebrate something. This could be a daily occurrence like the raising of the flag in the morning, the lowering of it in the evening. It could be on federal holidays such as the 4th of July or Memorial Day. It could be on a grievous circumstance like when President Grant died in 1885. They fired off cannons in his honor, as the soldiers here were great admirers of his. Or it could be more joyously when the first steamboat of tourists brought them back after a long winter, as indeed even in the 1880s tourism was a booming industry here on Mackinac Island. And the cannons they would be using for the purpose of salute shots is the same type of cannon we have for you all here today, this being our model 1841 6-pound smoothbore field gun. Now that's a bit of a long name, and most of the time the soldiers would just refer to it as a 6-pounder. Although I can tell you, the cannon, of course, weighs a lot more than 6 pounds. It is the cannonball that weighs 6 pounds to warrant that nickname. This gun can fire a 6-pound cannonball, and it can fire that about a mile. So if you imagine from here all the way out to the shores of Round Island over there. But if you remember the long technical name I gave, which I don't blame you if you don't remember it, I said smoothbore, meaning that there is no rifling inside the barrel to give the cannonball any sort of spin. So the smallest target, with utmost certainty, that we could hit at a mile's distance is roughly the size of Round Island. Not that great of a cannon. At a half mile, it was a bit better. You could reliably hit the broad side of a barn once out of every 3 shots. Still not great. For the 1840s, this was a marvel of its age. Its relative lightweight made it very easy to maneuver around the battlefield. And as the needs of the day progressed, commanders could move cannons such as these around instead of being static as they had been in previous wars. But even by the 1860s, this was recognized as being outdated. And by the 1880s, this is a relic of a past age. This is a 40-year-old antique. There is no military purpose for this gun. U.S. Army had developed rifled, breech-loading artillery that fired shells instead of cannonballs, and it could launch shells accurately at 5 miles away, instead of this cannon barely hitting anything at 1 mile away. So that's why it would be sent to not really strategically important posts, like here at Fort Mackinac, to serve in that ceremonial role. We figured that in honor of closing out the fort here today, and in honor of you all being here, we might as well fire it off for you. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Love the enthusiasm. Just enough to get started. All right. So, before we actually load a charge into the gun, there's a couple of safety steps we have to do first. So I'm going to cover the touch hole in the back of the cannon here with my thumb to make sure that no air gets in to stoke up any sparks or embers, while Alex uses the auger, or the gunner's worm. He's going to be searching for any debris that might be in the gun from our previous shot. If he finds anything, it's going to be some historically inaccurate aluminum foil. They, of course, did not use aluminum foil in the 1880s. They used muslin cloth. The muslin cloth can smolder and burn. We don't want to send any smoldering debris out onto some poor picnickers in Marquette Park. And this process, once done, renders our gun relatively safe, but we still have to sponge it just to make sure. So Alex is going to grab our sponge rammer, which is essentially a bit of damp sheep's wool at the end of the stick. He's going to shove it down the barrel, and that makes sure that any possible embers that could still be living in the gun are extinguished. Now it's safe for me to remove my hand. Now we are going to be loading in the cannon charge itself, which is about 4 ounces of black powder, which, albeit, is considerably smaller than they would have used in the 1880s. Back then they used 10-ounce charges, but we find 10 ounces is a bit excessive. It has a tendency to knock paintings off of walls, which isn't good, because our art museum is right down there. It can shatter windows, which for us is very bad because our bosses work right there. That would be a bad complaint. And it also spooks horses, and as we have many horses on the island, we want to make sure that we have a friendly relationship with their owners. Now that the gun is loaded, we are going to wheel it into the firing position. To the front. March. Now Alex is going to prime the piece. This is 2 simple steps. One is to take this brass spike called a gimlet and send it down the touch hole. This is going to pierce a hole in our cannon charge, making way for our ignition device to actually set it off. The device we'll be using is the same type of device they would have used in the 1880s and even way back in the 1840s. This is what's known as a friction primer. It is essentially a small brass tube filled with gunpowder. At the very top there is a pin running through a chemical known as fulminate of mercury, which is very susceptible to friction, hence the name friction primer. So when this pin is pulled, the friction of that will spark the fulminated mercury, which will then set off the gunpowder in the tube, which will shoot a jet of flame into the gun, setting it off for you all here today. But with the lanyard attached, there is now only 2 commands: fire the piece. But of course, this is a cannon, I will warn you, you might find it rather loud, so I would suggest either covering your ears or getting your cameras ready wherever your priorities in life may be. Anyways, ready, fire! There you go, cannon salute to close out the day here at Fort Mackinac. If you folks are interested, at Thank you. At 6:30, we'll be having our final rifle firing demonstration of the day. That's going to be down in the parade grounds.